What's up, y'all? You know where we're at right now, dude? We're at episode 100 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Today's the 14th of April, 2025. We're on episode 100, you guys. Whoever you guys are, you girls, or even the dogs that are sitting there next to you, potentially hearing what you're listening to, or whatever's going on. We're on episode 100. And I told you, meaning I said, on episode 99 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, which is where we're at, right? In the Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. It's 1/3 of our company as a whole, and I'll we'll get into this, but I said in the last episode that I knew what the title of this one was, and the title of this here episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, which is number 100, is laying a foundation. All right. And we'll get into why it's titled that. And we'll do this as we do, right? The intro, I'll talk about all three sides of the company. We'll talk about clothing, however many minutes that lasts. Sometimes it varies. And then we'll get into the actual discussion of why this is titled Laying a Foundation. First, let me play something on the guitar. This is my mom's guitar. Shout out to my mom. I don't play steel strings normally, and I don't play full-size guitars, but we'll play something for the sake of an intro. Unorthodox and untraditional, right? As I am. Let's get into it, dog. Yikes. All right. Intro, as we do, right? Three sides to us as a whole. In the Image Clothing Company. Yeah, I'm the founder, Evan Strong. We have another third besides this one here, which is the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. Shoot. All right, man. Like I say, don't believe me. You don't got to believe me on nothing, dude, ever, because I don't care if you do. But we talk about truth here under the podcast, In the Image Clothing Company podcast, right? The gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things, is what we discuss. Oh, my heavens. It's been unreal, dude. It's been unreal. All right? It's been unreal. So, the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, I talk about the anatomy of the human body in depth, as it is, no opinions, we keep them aside, because the body only has one way it actually works, one neutral position within every joint of the body. Clothing is placed onto the human being and potentially alters it because there's a center line to our bodies. The sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and then the jaw stabilizing the entire body naturally. Those are the things I talk about and touch on being the center line of the human being. And oversized clothing in itself is an imbalance. And we got all sorts of things, right? Drawstrings, zippers, buttons, shoelaces, heels on shoes, seams, dreaded collar seams, all the things that could potentially be anything. Pockets, things in pockets, buttons, I said, but belt loops. Oh, man. Just everything and anything and all things that aren't allowing the human body to do the only thing that it ever will. We address those things and just keyword allow the human body to work. That's the whole thing under In the Image Clothing Company, physically. And then we spread the gospel of Jesus Christ in all that we do. So, another third of us is In the Image Clothing Company music. I'm a fingerstyle guitarist, as you heard a little bit there. I play nylon string guitars with a radius and somewhere around half-sized because I set up guitars properly and show how to, and we talk about sizings because the hands are essentially the shoulders. The feet are essentially the hips. They have to stem from somewhere, and each one of those things determines the other one. And the body only ever works as a whole, activated in its entirety. If there's ever a moment when any muscle within the body is deactivated or any joint is out of its only neutral, there's compensation trying to happen within the body because anywhere any of it goes, all of it does. So there really, truly, actually, every opinion aside, is only one way the human body works. And because of that, clothing has to sit on it the same for a man, a woman, somebody who's tall or short, somebody who's fat or skinny, somebody who's from any part of the earth and any time period to ever be. You're a human being. We're all designed universally in the image of Jesus Christ by and through our living God himself. Yeah. So pants need to be entirely above the hips. So there's no restriction to the functionality of the pelvis as a whole. And the angle has to be slightly and has to. There's no question. There's no possible way you can do it any other way and have your core muscles stay activated. The angle of the waistband, I haven't quite said it yet, has to be slightly higher in the front than the rear. Muscles only shorten to work. Stretch within clothing goes the opposite direction. So ideally no stretch ever within clothing or your body is damaged, period, and done. No opinion I could have, right? Like that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled that, there's no opinion I could have. We talk about things as they are here. So the tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to be evenly behind the bones on the peak of our shoulders because those are the other end of the collarbone. That's how we keep our shoulders in their only neutral position, which is behind our head. These muscles back here are called the upper trapezius. They connect to the very base of the rear of the skull, along the cervical spine, which is just the part of the spine that is the neck, and then to the top/rear of the shoulder. And so that's just where seams have to be. No opinion I could have. Button-ups are different because there's a band of material rather than a singular seam. They naturally sit behind the shoulders. That's great. I'm actually wearing double button-ups right now. If you're watching an in the Image Clothing Company podcast right now in visual plus audio, you can see. If you're an audio only, now you know it's available in another form as well. So the edge seams of our shoulders should just be right at the very edges because that's where the operation of the shoulder joint is. And it's not going to do anything else. For anybody else. Ever. We didn't design the human body. We can't decide how it works. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled, We Didn't Design It, We Can't Decide It, because we cannot. You can do whatever you want, but repercussions. So, 2 things we call prerequisites under In the Image Clothing Company. Conditional, because there's not always ropes in shoes that we call laces, and there's not always tags in clothing, but when there is a rope going across the top of the human foot in a weave pattern, there's only one way to do that is shaped the way that the human foot mechanically and structurally is. The human body is just a mechanical machine. Look at my shoulders move up and down as I say it, right? It only will ever do what it will do. And that's what we call In the Image Clothing Company's shoelacing technique. With that, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the center line of the human being, because there is one. No say, no possible dispute, okay? Secondly, we remove all tags from clothing. Any tag placed inside of clothing is either causing a physical gap, which is changing the skeletal system's only working position, and then damage to the body happens. And or it's just not allowing the musculature to activate, and then compensation's trying to happen, and damage to the body, all right? Yeah. So, let's get into it, because we're on episode 100. And it's not like some big old celebrational thing so much. It's cool, and it's great that we've got 100 episodes of documented information that's valid and always will be. Because we talk about things that are eternal, that will never change. We don't have a podcast where we just say conditional, like, stuff, right? Like, stuff. No, we talk about stuff that's real. And that's what I'm saying, is I'm laying a foundation. Before I say anything else further in this episode, I want to say there's no pride behind me saying things that are phrased alluding to this being the case. But I will say this, as bold as it is, because it's the case. And I want to show the difference between trying to get quick success and then, like one of those early episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast is titled, Playing the Long Game. And I'm in here for the long haul. I'm in here for life. These podcast episodes will last for literally ever, as far as the validity as far as how valid the information is that we say here, it will last for eternity. All right? I'm sinful by nature, as is every human being. I'm messing up on how I'm delivering things, and never will I do anything perfect or be perfect in this life. That's why we get resurrected through Jesus Christ after we die. Okay? I paused on that word after. This life's a probationary state. But I will say this. A lot of people have like a goal of an end number of, if they're doing something like a podcast, they might get to 100 sometime. That's why I want to make it so clear. I'm not trying to be prideful. I'm not trying to compare. But I'm saying, look at what's really happening. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Do More, Say Less, because that's what's been going on. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Preaching What I've Practiced on the back end, okay? I can't say this stuff and have it be prideful if it's just me speaking on things as they are. And I'm laying a foundation with 100 episodes of the podcast. We might be at thousands, millions, billions. Who knows, right? I mean, why not? Okay? Down the road sometime is what I'm saying. What I've done here with 100 episodes is lay a foundation. For those of you in audio only, I'm like kind of staring at, really, I can see myself. I can actually see just like part of my face because, it's being partially covered. But I'm being real with this. I'm laying a foundation here. There's nowhere near the end goal. I don't care where the end is. I did a freestyle when I had that little guitar, Frank the guitar that I broke. And it was something like, I don't even care where the end is. And I don't even care if it's in my sights at all. Right? I don't care, dude. I don't care. What I'm doing right now, though, is laying a foundation for what this already is and will always be. Listen to my voice, dude. I'm wearing double button-ups. What's up with that, dude? The founder of In the Image Clothing Company. It's not about me, but I'm just saying. If I was trying to make it about me, I'd sit here and be like, look at all we've done and praise us for it. It's on the opposite end. It's like, no, we're just getting started, all right? This is not about me because this is my kids and my kids' kids' kids and their kids, grandkids, and those guys have a couple generations too that they're talking about down the road maybe, and if, right? That's what I mean. This is a foundation that's been laid. 100 episodes, okay? Let me talk about this. Jesus Christ, when he came to the earth, he didn't come to the earth and have the 33 years be the end goal. God came to the earth and laid a foundation. He gave us his perfect example. He had his apostles write down what happened. And then he left and sent us his second comforter, the Holy Spirit of God himself. But he laid a foundation. And now it's like 2,000 years later, give or take, and I'm sitting here preaching about the foundation that was laid. Our earthly lives aren't the point of this. And that's obvious to a lot of disciples of Jesus Christ. But what I want to do and what I've been doing, let me be very clear, right? Please. Let me be clear. I like to be clear. I like to be very clear, and I'm clear. When I say stuff, I mean it. I don't say much a lot of the time. Right? I've already been doing this. I can't be saying something that's not happening if it's not happening. I've laid the foundation. That's what I'm saying in this episode here of In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, the 100th. Is I'm saying, let's reflect a bit, and you don't got to have any kind of care or praise for Evan Strong. But I'm saying I'm doing all that I can to keep myself out of it. Jesus Christ himself is God. Right? Don't agree with me. Don't believe me, right? But there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled One God. I read scripture. You're not going to dispute what I'm saying. Well, you can is what I mean, but what I said was word for word reading out of the same Bible you read. The same Book of Mormon you have access to. So here's what I'm going to say, though, furthering that. Jesus Christ is God. But while he was here, he looked to the Father, and okay, confusion, but good, right? Keeping us questioning, otherwise we think we're in charge, and we're not. Okay, there's one God. And God himself looked to the Father in all things. Jesus Christ's life wasn't the end goal. It was to pave a path. Well, what did John the Baptist say? He's come to make the path straight, pave the way, something, right? I'm not trying to casually say something, but make the path straight, right? When John's talking about there's coming one that's greater than I, one whose sandals I'm not even worthy to stoop down and untie. And John was paving the way for God himself to come and lay a foundation, the higher and holier law. But then it's not about Jesus Christ and the end of his earthly life as if that's the goal, is once he's dead, everything should be better. He did what he could while he was here. And the difference is between him and every other human being to ever live is he did it perfectly, and none of us ever could. But it's, like I was saying, give or take 2,000 years after God was on this earth in physical fleshly form as Jesus Christ, who he is, the great I am himself. And he laid a foundation. He gave information and understanding that we're still taking from today, and it still applies to us today. And unless here or there or whatever, just about, we'll say, just so I'm not saying something that's not quite right in this instant, just about all of us weren't here 2,000 years ago, give or take, when God was in the flesh. But he's still just as here today in the spirit. And every word that he said while he was here, coming out of the mouth of Jesus Christ himself, is just as valid today as it was when he was personally verbalizing it to the people that he was physically with. Somewhere around 30-something AD. Okay? Now that's the goal. Okay? Let me be very clear to say, it's the goal. I can't do that. I'm not anything besides somebody who's trying my best to follow Jesus Christ. But that's the goal with what we talk about under In the Image Clothing Company, is, as of today's date, back the 14th of April, 2025, to the very first episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, if we're just talking about the 100 episodes that we've got on this 1/3 of our company, the goal is everything we're saying here, at least the bulk of really what's getting discussed, applies to every human to ever live. And how do we do that? Because it's truth. If it is. All right? Not every word that comes out of the mouth of Evan Strong is truth. But that's why I like to relay it to God himself. Because every word that comes out of the mouth of God is the word of God, who is the truth. And let me step one back and say the way, and then we'll go to the truth and the life, right? Scripture. So, that's my goal. That's all of our goals if we're trying to do all that we can to just have a fulfilled life, is to have everything that we do and say be something that could last forever. And because of that, one thing I was thinking about doing, and I didn't do it, right before this, I haven't been focused on that, other than I've noticed a little bit. I'll give a little bit of context. What I was going to say, right, is I was thinking about, before making this 100th episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Laying a Foundation, I was thinking maybe I can see accumulation, all the views that we have on every episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast combined, so I could just give a number for the sake of context, because it might be somewhere around 100, 200 views total with 100 podcast episodes that I've made. Okay? Because I'm not in it for the instant success. And as long as we're doing all that we can to discuss things that will last for literally ever, and things that apply to literally every human being to ever live, then it doesn't matter how long it takes off, okay? Let me say that a little bit more specifically. it doesn't matter how long it takes to take off as far as start getting quite a lot of views, start getting quite a lot of people getting this information, this truth that we're giving them, that there really is only one way the human body works. Things like I was referencing in the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Dogs, Children, Teenagers, and Adults. And I talked about how I went on somewhere between a 40 and 60 mile walk that day. And I was like, well, I'm not going to wake up sore the next day. And I didn't. The next day was yesterday, Sunday. So that episode was filmed on Saturday, just 2 days ago. I didn't get sore the next day. I didn't wake up sore today. Some people talk about what they call DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. It's not really real because there's only one way the body works. Yee! Right? It's truth. And this is what this is the thing about this being laid as a foundation is it's not like I have something that I'm talking about here that I'm hoping as long as I can keep the hype up and keep the views up on each thing we put out, then people might stay on board and believe in something until they find out it's not actually right. The last episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast that I filmed was yesterday and is titled, So Who's Really Right Then? Right? And you can go listen to that. And the reason I'm referencing it within this moment is because it doesn't matter if I'm right. I'm not. Let's say I'm wrong, ideally, right? That's better in a lot of cases. But we're talking about truth. There's no right or wrong to truth. And there's no hype that could make In the Image Clothing Company more popular, more beneficial, or especially more right. Doesn't matter if we're right or wrong or anything. What we're talking about here lasts forever because God designed our bodies and we didn't. What we're talking about here under the podcast side of things, In the Image Clothing Company podcast, is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's not something I decided either. So I'm laying a foundation here, meaning I have. And what, am I saying something, or is this just, you can look and see that it happened? There's 100 episodes of a podcast here titled In the Image Clothing Company Podcast. So nobody can have a dispute on what? About if this kid's actually doing work or putting it in, or if this kid's making something up, because I've discussed things so thoroughly, you couldn't possibly dispute it, because things are just what they are. I'm also not out here claiming, right, that I'm going to do something like have a good amount of podcast episodes, because some people, this is like their end goal. I'm not comparing, but I'm just doing all that I can to make this as real as it gets, okay? The phrases I say, I'll say a couple of them. As real as it gets. As obvious as it is once you see it. Things I couldn't make up. I didn't decide it. I can't design it. I didn't design it, so I can't decide it. I'm not in charge. Don't believe me. It's not about me. It's not about them. Who is it about? Jesus Christ. All these phrases that are commonly said by me under In the Image Clothing Company podcast. There's only one way the human body works. There's only one way to lace shoes and tie them. There's only one neutral joint within everything in the body, meaning one neutral location it sits in. There's only one way the body stands. There is a center line. Stretching isn't necessary. There's no such thing as warming up a body that should stay always activated, because that's the only way that it will ever work. These things that I say are so bold, but you don't have to believe it, okay? Because I've laid a foundation. And I've discussed it all so thorough. We've got 100 episodes of the podcast, In the Image Clothing Company podcast. I'm not making any of this up. I'm not making any of this something that it isn't. I'm not stretching anything to be a little bit more than it actually is. And you don't have to question it, because you can go back and listen to all the context that I've verbally spoken about, all the things that we talk about. And I couldn't have an opinion on it. How much can we stutter on things that are real, right? I couldn't have an opinion on it that could be valid. And it wouldn't matter either way when I'm telling you and actually like asking you, please don't believe me. because it's either true or it's made up, and this manifests itself to you, but you got to try it. You got to put in the work. You're not going to sit here and listen to a podcast and just choose not to believe it and then have your life be changed in the ways that it could by applying what we talk about under In the Image Clothing Company, all three sides as a whole. So I've laid a foundation here, okay? And I just want to make it clear. You don't got to give me some kind of credit, but I don't need people coming at me saying that they've been a physical therapist for longer than I've been alive, okay? And then I'm claiming something about the human body and they don't agree with it. Well, don't agree with it then. But is it true, right? I have context for you to go look. I've laid a foundation. I don't need somebody coming at me that's got longer experience playing guitars than I've been alive, and they've been playing guitars with a flat fretboard, flat saddle, and flat nut, and try to tell me how it is when the human hands are round, and I didn't decide that. So keep your opinions to yourself, and we talk about truth under In the Image Clothing Company. Imperfectly, but we do. So I don't need these kind of things. I don't need somebody telling me anything about anything, thinking they have an idea about shoelacing needing to be any other way, or thinking that they're exempt from it because X, Y, and any other letter that you could choose. There's only one way. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled There Is Only One. Okay? There's only one way. I don't need anybody telling me that it's anything out of fashion to keep your pants above your hips. The pelvis only functions the way that it does. And there's so many muscles going into the functionality of the pelvis. Rotations, hinging, the base of the spine, the top of the femurs. And it comes from the feet, but it can come from the hands, okay? I don't need anybody telling me nothing about nothing, or trying to claim that what I say or said or am talking about anywhere from this point forward, let's say, if we can do that, because I've laid a foundation. And I discuss things in the moments that I do, and we've got 100 episodes of this podcast here, In the Image Clothing Company podcast. I speak thorough, dude. So don't question it. Meaning, if you got a question on it, find the answer. Don't question me. Don't care if I'm right or wrong. It's not about me. But I've laid a foundation, brother. I've put in the work, so now we can just kind of cruise from this point, okay? Because now we've got episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast I can refer people to, talking about running, and you've been running longer than I've been alive, as far as continuously. You're Forrest Gump's personal trainer, right? Shout out to the movie Forrest Gump. I like to give credit where I give credit, right? And you're trying to tell me running's so healthy for the body, and I'm Evan Strong talking about running the way that I do, but there's an entire episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Running. All right. If you got claims and things and whatever you want to believe about workouts and how the body should, might, and maybe will work, but you're still like recovering after you thought that it could have done something, I don't care, because I don't need to be right. But I made an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Workouts, dude. And I went in such depth. And there's a lot of videos on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, by the way. I think there's 177 as of the last time that I checked. 177. Most all of them are at least a half hour in length of me continuously talking, not just like randomly long, but I'm giving deep, thorough context on the human body, the only way that it works, the way that I didn't design, okay? But we don't know what we don't know. As I say, right? As God says, we can't be held accountable for what we don't know. But once we know, then you are held accountable. And I've got the context on the things that I've got the context on. I have 100 episodes here, deeply discussing stuff. In the Image Clothing Company podcast, okay? So I just want to make it clear, nothing to do with me, but actually a lot to do with please leave me alone, right? I don't want the credit, but I also definitely don't need anyone coming at me for anything about them thinking I'm wrong about something. Think it. Think it all you want. And think it till you're blue in the face. Maybe I am. But I've laid a foundation. Refer to that, not me as an individual. Believe I'm wrong all you want. But if you haven't tried the things we're talking about here, that I say boldly apply to every human to ever live, if you haven't tried it, you got no place to talk. Okay? So, same with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Don't come after me. I've got 100 episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. The whole point of In the Image Clothing Company podcast is to give context, discussions, and information on the truth of all things, aka the gospel of Jesus Christ. I say a lot of scripture in here. You can't oppose those words and claim that they're Evan Strong's because they're not. If you got a problem with it, what I say often, right, is stick around. If you have a problem with In the Image Clothing Company, stick around. Deeper context will bring more understanding. If you have a problem with me, Evan Strong, hear this correct. Stick around as far as In the Image Clothing Company content. Leave me alone, please. I'm just a human being. I'm just an individual. Okay? But I'm also the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. So, Evan Strong is my name. Here's the thing, though. I've laid a foundation. Okay? That's what I've done here. Meaning, we're just getting started. And I said that earlier, and I just want to make it so clear. And I want to make this clear, kind of coupled with that. When I say we're just getting started, anything could happen, all right? Maybe we get one more episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast on here, wherever they're placed. Or just filmed and audio documented, right? And then there's no more that ever come. All right? That's a possibility. I could die tonight. Or anytime. What I mean by we're just getting started is what I was saying about my grandkids, great-great-grandkids, grandkids, and, you know, their nieces and nephews. And then some stepchildren, too, because stuff happens. You know what I'm talking about? You don't have to have a question on it because I've given the context and laid the foundation. What I'm saying is, what's here is here. And if it's true, then it applies. Yesterday, when episode 99 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast was documented. Today, the day after that one, and forever. Okay? And you could take any number of podcasts and put it in the same place. Just meaning our God himself is the truth of all. And he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Evan Strong is not. But what we discuss, and what me, Evan Strong, being the founder, tries all I can to say is true. Okay? So here's your foundation. Here's your 100 episodes. And here's to many more. Unless people are attending my funeral next week and they're like, maybe we'll make 101st just to let people know he died, right? Who knows? I don't, but God does. Okay? Here we are. So, foundations. God laid a foundation so that Evan Strong can sit in a movie theater on the 14th of April, 2025 and watch the last 3 episodes of season 5 of the TV show titled The Chosen, which is a depiction of the life of Jesus Christ, which was about 2,000 years before today. And because he laid his foundation, I'm learning from it. My kids and my kids' kids and so forth are also able to as well. Because what he laid a foundation of, and again, the separation between just a sinful kid, Evan Strong, and God, right? But the focus in this, what I'm saying is the truth within what's happening. Every word out of the mouth of God, Jesus Christ himself, is truth. And if I can say things that align with the truth of God, then that's eternal as well. All right? And I've done that. Not perfectly, nor ever will it be out of my mouth. Because Evan Strong is always, in this life, imperfect. Can I make that as clear as I can make it? I like to make things clear. All right? We've laid a foundation here. So, I don't like to speak if I don't need to speak, okay? There's a little bit of context on me as an individual human being. And I've said that many times on In the Image Clothing Company podcast. What I'm so grateful for is what we have documented. Because if people try to start up a debate with me on something, I don't have to sit there and try to explain myself. Because I've documented it in episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And I can just say, let me refer you to this. Because anything that I would say right now, as long as it's truth and as long as it's all that I really know of what this thing is, as it is, then look, I did a fairly great, if I can say so, job of documenting this question you're having in this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Because I've been very intentional on praying through the episodes and making them about what they need to be for reasons like this. And really just because there's only truth, and so I'm trying. And that's all I'm ever going to be able to do is try. Okay? And God takes the rest. He uses imperfect people to do perfect things. Really his perfect will that we're trying to follow and allow to be. Yeah. Okay? So, yeah. So that's what I've done. If anyone's got a question, I've laid a foundation. And it looks weird. Okay? What do we got? Maybe somewhere between 100, 200 total views on 100 episodes. So some episodes have 20 views, some have 3, some have none, right? That's what I mean by that. Just I want to make this as real as it gets. I want to document this as well because we'll see what happens. Okay? All right? Remember, I'm saying this. Oh, but you don't have to just only remember it. I've documented it. I've done it. I put in the labor so that I can then eat the fruit. And I've been partaking of some beautiful fruit. And it hasn't come without me putting in work. But I haven't been talking so much about what's been going on. Except for the amount that I've spoken within 100 episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Okay? So, don't get it twisted. I'm not being prideful. Like, look how much I've done. I'm just making it clear of how much has happened. Okay? So I've laid a foundation. The wise man builds his house upon a rock. The foolish man builds his house upon the sand. Another word for God himself is the rock, Jesus the Christ. Okay? If we build what we're doing and everything and anything and all things we're ever doing as a human being on truth, meaning if we can just try, as I say, right, we're never going to be that great of Christians in this life, but can we try? Please? I'm trying. You don't got to believe nothing, but even when I don't believe it, God tells me, look, you're not going to be perfect anyway, so yeah, that's all we can do is try. And I've built this foundation of these 100 episodes on a rock. Not on conditional trends of the world, not on a conditional product, not on a conditional time period or a conditional part of the earth, but on truth, because I built it on God. I built this foundation around the way that the human body works, which is God and his design. And I built this foundation around discussing Scripture and God himself. And you know what I did while building this foundation? Is I made it clear time and time and time again to leave me out of it. Don't give me the credit. Please just leave me alone out of courtesy. Don't believe me. It's not about me. All these things. I did that for both myself and everybody else. And what happens by doing that is giving the glory to God. Because there's no conditions on Evan Strong being the founder of this company, In The Image Clothing Company. There's no conditions on if we ever sold a single item of clothing, period. This foundation of In The Image Clothing Company that has been laid is on the human body's only function and the truth of all things, aka the good news of our God himself, Jesus the Christ. So, if anybody's got any question, this is just the start. I'm not making a single promise on what's to come. But if there was nothing else besides this, this is still just the foundation. Because now from this point, anything can happen. No more, or just an absurd amount more from In The Image Clothing Company. And this is that rock. Because some people believe that God stopped speaking when he died. But then those individuals may still follow his every teaching to the best of their sinful by nature abilities. Right? So all the truth that does, dwell within In The Image Clothing Company, if there was never more additional to come, you can still glean as Ruth did, right? Out there in the fields, after everybody had taken all the main crop from the field, Ruth was out there and gleaning, and she was taking the last little bits that were left. That's what the word glean means, is take the little bit that you can from it. And take the leftovers. Take the things that other people reject. It's kind of like eating out of the trash in a sense. People eat their food and they leave some there and they throw it in the garbage. And to them, that's trash. And to you, that could be enough to nourish your body. To some people, they might look at In The Image Clothing Company and think, this guy's got something that he's trying to push. And other people, as I've said, with like the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, those videos are filmed, most all of them at least up until today's date, outside with no specific special microphone other than just what comes on this little device that I've been using to film them with. And there's wind noise, there's kids playing sports, and there's birds and construction and school bells. And I've said before, those who really want the information, as long as you can do anything to hear the words that I'm speaking in these videos, then the information is there and the truth still remains in it. That's like Ruth out there gleaning through the fields when everybody else thought that it wasn't worth it to get the last little bits. If we can glean those last little bits, that might be all that we need and the entirety of what we need. And other people might have thought that there was nothing left. And we live in a modern day. We live in a modern world. We live in this man-made construct of society that's not real. It's just placed onto our natural earth that God designed. And there's so much to believe or to not believe, and there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Believe It or Not, Don't. I've laid a foundation here. I haven't done it alone. Without trying to be fake humble in the slightest, I really don't feel like I've done much of any of it. Even though, as I phrase it, as far as human beings go, up until today's date, the 14th of April, 2025, up until today's episode, the 100th of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Laying a Foundation, I've been the only person that's put anything into this company. And it's just getting started. I've just laid a foundation. I'm content doing what we're commanded to do and enduring to the end. And I'm content not seeing the fruit right away because you have to nourish the tree and water it, and then it begins to grow. I'm content because I know God, and I'm not trying to have some type of company, but I'm trying to spread truth. And no matter how long that takes, it'll still be the same information. God tells us to be persistent. The prophets are persistent. He's persistent with us more than we could ever be with each other. When we're trying to teach something to somebody that is true, meaning share the gospel, the good news, literally translated. Sometimes it takes a while. And there's things that, even though me personally as an individual, Evan Strong, I don't like to repeat myself if it's not necessary. Certain things under In the Image Clothing Company, I say phrases like, I could say that as many times as I could say that, and it wouldn't be too many times. It couldn't be said too much, I say often with certain things. Because sometimes it just takes people a little bit of time to understand the truth. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to put their, as we talk about often here, even since the very first episode, right, of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled The Launch, I use that phrase, preconceived ideas. And often we as human beings come into things thinking we know what they are before we know what they are. And it might take a little while for us to strip off this idea that we had of what the thing actually is. Because we talk about things that otherwise don't get so often. There's not many people talking about how clothing is the actual cause of your physical problems in your human body. And so when you hear us under In the Image Clothing Company talking about these things, it seems foreign, but it's the actual one cause. If and when it is. I mean, anything could cause anything, but if these things are happening, they're happening. And I just, as I say, I'm going to say it again right now, I discuss things so thoroughly. You couldn't possibly dispute it. So that's why the videos are long, right? And I've said that, but that's why. And a lot of them are. So, anyway, my life's looked crazy throughout this, man. And it always will. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we live lives that look weird to people who don't know God. But there's only one God. And you can't deny that the things that we talk about here work? And how can something be universal if it didn't come from somewhere that's not us, man? There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled The Universe Has a Name. I joked about it. Who you calling on with the universe title, right? I was talking about how things can't be universal unless there's something outside of those things that allows it to be. I've laid a foundation here where you don't have to have any questions. And by no means do you need to, so please don't come to me about things. Please leave me alone. There's so much information here. That I don't even know quite how I understand fully. Meaning, to the degrees that I understand the things I do, no pride in this. I mean, you can perceive whatever you want, but I know how to let the human body work, how to allow the human body to work, how to leave the human body alone and just watch it in all the miraculousness that it is because God designed it, better than most all physical therapists on the earth, better than most all chiropractors on the earth, better than most all personal trainers on the earth, and those type of professions, quote unquote, that I have a problem with for the right reasons. Because there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Designed to Work. And the human body should. There could be any reason that it doesn't, but unless there's a reason, that's why we're given this, is for it to do the thing that it should. To do the thing that people are trying to get it to, if we just allow it to, that's the actual fix. So I've laid a foundation. You don't got to believe nothing. But if you're denying truth, you're denying the only truth that there actually is. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to God. And before I sound like I'm all high and mighty, I do that in times. But it doesn't get us anywhere. Never could. But neither does going to the chiropractor week after week. Right? Things we've talked about since the founding. And things that I couldn't have an opinion on, but they manifest themselves to you. But you have to be willing to put in the work. And no pride in this, but there's no way that I could be where I am right now if I wasn't willing and hadn't had already put in the work. So you can't question me as of today's date, the 14th of April, 2025, because you can look, even just seeing the visual aspect of In the Image Clothing Company podcast episodes, and you can see my body and how it has changed. Even if you don't venture to the other two sides of our company. All right? This one's the most important because of what we talk about here. Because God's the miracle worker, not me. And so even if you don't hear me discussing all the anatomy and stuff on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, well, you hear discussions on our living, ever-present God, Jesus Christ, if you listen to and maybe watch, in addition to listening, In the Image Clothing Company podcast episodes. That's all I'm doing here is pointing us to God. And you know how I'm doing it? Imperfectly. In case there's any question, I'm not so good at this. But in times I'm really good at this. I'm no better than any other human being. But I can say this because it's the case. There's certain things that I know so much more about than other human beings. And there's certain understandings that I have a much, 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 much deeper level of than a lot of other human beings. So I try my best in my imperfect ways to not talk about things I don't know stuff about. I don't speak so often. If you only know me through In the Image Clothing Company, and especially In the Image Clothing Company podcast, you might think otherwise, because I'm sitting here ripping through words sometimes, right? Speaking really quick, playing with wordplay, beatboxing, playing guitar. I discuss things so thorough, and I seem like a good conversationalist because I am, but I don't like to speak unless it's important. And that might sound prideful, but it's up to me. So I've laid a foundation. So that with the things that are documented and discussed, there doesn't have to be any question. And I don't have to answer any questions that I already have spoken on here. So please leave me alone. And refer to the foundation. Said synonymous to that. Again, I stutter when it gets real. I get back down to what's it all really about? Yeah, when I say the phrase that I just said, refer to the foundation, I can just say, refer to God. Refer to the Holy Bible. Refer to the Book of Mormon. Refer to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Refer to your prayer closet. Refer to your relationship with Jesus Christ. Because that's how you get to the truth. The foundation that was laid by God, that we can just relay. That's what we're doing here, in case there's any question. And we're just getting started. So, have a little bit of fun with it, man. Sometimes I'm off tempo. Sometimes I'm off key when I sing. Sometimes the guitar is just entirely out of tune and I didn't check the tuning before I played. Sometimes I say things wrong. Right. Have a little bit of fun with it. God's here now. And he's going to correct us if he needs to. He's going to take the reins. And ideally we let him rather than any other outcome of that. So in my imperfect nature, I'm going to do as I've been doing and continually try to keep myself out of all of this. But I'm just as human as everybody else. So here's your foundation. Here's quote unquote proof, if you will, that I'm playing the long game. That it's not about the immediate successes. And that the paradoxical gospel of Jesus Christ is called that because it is. Here's your quote unquote proof of what In the Image Clothing Company really is. Because I put in all this work without seeing all that much coming from it externally, as far as anybody getting on board. In fact, it's been the other end. People have tried to tell me that what I'm saying here isn't correct. And that's not up to any of us to decide, because truth is truth. Episode 2 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. So we have 100 episodes. Nobody can question if I've laid a foundation. They're here. Find out for yourself. Don't come at me. Leave me alone. Evan Strong saying those words right now? Please. And I might sound and seem and look and act a little bit standoffish and be perceived as though I am in public, if you ever see me. But it's not about me. And I'm not a different person. I'm not putting on a show here because I can sit here behind a camera and a microphone and do whatever I please that's different than me. But there's sides to me. And I'm a pretty reserved person. But that's up to me and God. And so if you get all offended because you see me sometime in public, no matter who you are, and I'm not acting how you think that I should or how you perceive me to be behind a camera sitting here on a floor in a house that I don't pay rent in and have been allowed to live in for the past 3 years, give or take, wearing clothing that I've only purchased used, besides maybe 2 or 3 items that I currently own. Okay, this is as real as it gets. I've laid a foundation. That's what this is, if you're questioning. This isn't the end goal. And can I please try all that I can do, even in every sin that I make, to use myself as an example and not try to be like my hypocritical father. Ooh, I'm not throwing people under the bus. I have had some terrible examples in my life, and I'm doing all that I can to be a good one. And in everything that I do, there's still people that are going to be saying stuff, all right? But if you got a question of what's really going on when I'm so bold about things, and how can he be, right? I say that kind of thing that often. That often means whatever it means. How can I be so bold about anything? Just being a kid? And I just said I'm a kid. I just said not to believe me. I just said, as I say all the time when I say it, where my place really is as far as an equal to you and always under God. Ideally at his feet, at the footstool of God. Right? Same place we're going to come to at the end of this life when we get judged for all the things we did or didn't do and all the things that everybody else thought happened and didn't do, right? Yeah, so condemn me for what I have said because I've said it. So you're just sinning by being judgmental, and neither of us could change what happened anyway, right? I've laid a foundation. $100 episodes. A building's only as good as its foundation. And I've made it very clear since very early on, I wanted to talk about things the way that I did. Again, documented. You don't got to question it. I can't be saying something that's not the case when these are numbered. And so I can't just kind of slip one out here or there, pretend like nobody knows it happened without a gap from, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we're on 7 now, right? All of a sudden you missed a couple and they're not there anymore because I tried to hide something. No, they're numbered. That's why these podcast episodes are numbered. So that you can condemn me for what I have said. And I can't hide from it because I can't hide from God. But this is what I was saying and what I will continue to say. Since the very early times, I was so intentional on saying things bold because they'll never change. And often, right, people start off saying something and they think they're doing something they want something to be or something, or who knows really, right? And then it changes. So, what we've been saying since the absolute founding date, since the first video under In The Image Clothing Company on the main side, because that's the only side that existed at the beginning. Then the podcast came, In the Image Clothing Company Podcast. And then the music side came, In the Image Clothing Company Music. Since that very, very first documentation of anything, since we weren't even actually labeled In the Image Clothing Company, because that happened on the 23rd of September, 2024, and I was making videos at least a month or two prior to that, the things I was discussing there are the same things that we're discussing today, and the same things that will be applying and being discussed under In the Image Clothing Company as long as it ever exists, and the same things that apply to human beings and every one of them to ever live forever. And boy, am I so right. Right? See what we're really doing here. I said in the launch video, well, the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled The Launch. Well, I said in the Image Clothing Company videos before we even had the podcast, I've been saying it since the founding, as I'm saying, the same things that we're saying now and always will. But what I was saying is, hear what we are saying, not what you are hearing. Because sometimes people hear what they hear, but they didn't hear what was actually said, and there's only what was said. Your perceptions don't matter. Mine don't either, if they oppose the truth. And sometimes I'm opposing truth, all right? I mean, let me make it clear. It's not about me. But that's why I phrase it like the bulk of what we talk about here is truth. Because if I try to say it, I just know how people take stuff, dude. And so sometimes I'm pretty darn intentional about wording things in ways that, like, it's like, please hear what I'm saying. Like, yikes. I mean, I can't try to get everybody to hear things as they were said, which is the only way they were said. But I sometimes go, to lengths to make it a little bit extra clear so that there's less of the potential for people to have a question on what I had said. Okay. In all aspects of my life. I speak pretty clearly, dude. If I'm saying something, all right, but then who knows, right? I mean, I'm doing all I can. And sometimes I feel like I could do more. Sometimes maybe I could. And sometimes I'm trying to overachieve and be better than I ever will be. So thank you. We're on episode 100 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. My name is Evan Strong. I'm the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. There's 3 sides to us as a whole. Check out the other 2 sides if you'd like to. We will have clothing available made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting correct, and allowing the body to work. Yeah, so if you'd like to purchase it, only in your size. Oversized clothing is so damaging to the body. It's the 14th of April, 2025. Go to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and check it out if you haven't. It's welcome to all. All are welcome to it. God himself, black, white, bond, and free, male, female, any part of the earth, any time period to ever live, right? All the human beings that are one of those things. They're welcome into the body of Christ. It takes a willingness, it takes a heart posture, it takes a broken heart and a contrite spirit. It takes putting your own life aside and putting God first, even when it doesn't make sense. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Willingness, and I was physically shaking in that episode because of all that was going on when that was being documented. So, in case there's a question, I've laid a foundation. Yeah, it's not some kind of joke. I don't have some kind of high hopes that I could make a company out of something. I'm out here telling people the truth that I didn't decide. And what is your decision, though, is if you receive it. God stands at the door and knocks. But it's our choice whether we open the door or not. And all we have to do is open it, and he will come in and dine with us. The solution to your physical pain, and I mean it, is clothing. Is the things that we talk about so thoroughly under In the Image Clothing Company that you couldn't have a question on how to let it be. The place you will find the most fulfillment on the earth is an imperfect organization, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. God is for you. Jesus Christ, he's for the sinner and he's for the one who claims they don't sin. And I'm both of those people. Depends on whatever day you're trying to ask me about something, right? Turning the other cheek, but just because I don't want to talk to you. So actually I'm being mean sometimes. Or am I? Because I'm my own individual human being and I don't have any obligation to speak to you because you've walked up to me or sat next to me. Yikes. All right. God is God. Truth is truth. And the Image Clothing Company does all that we can. And we're never doing it so great, but ideally we're doing some things that are pretty great. Can we talk about the paradoxical gospel of Jesus Christ? That's what we've done for 100 episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, okay? So in case there's any question, there doesn't need to be, because I make things clear. Strike the fear of God into people, man. Myself included. If I try to oppose any of this stuff, it's just as damaging to me. It does not matter that it's me. It could be anybody founding In the Image Clothing Company. But on the contrary to that, but going along with that exactly also, I've said there's a reason that it's me. Because nobody would do this quite how I am. But God is God, and he would make another me in an instant if I weren't willing. So, thank you.